Hello, my name is Linda Rutherford. Terry asked me to judge this month. I didn't realize I double booked myself because it's also my circle's turn to prepare the pre-service meal at church tonight. So this is my compromise: is to get you a PowerPoint. I enjoyed judging for you, and there are a lot of really good images. I'm going to just start with altered reality. The definition of altered reality I was given it was that it must be obvious that reality has been altered. And there was one image that was so well done, I felt it looked too realistic for it to be obvious. And that is this image, Cranes and Crescent Moon. It just is really, really well done. It's not clear that it's alternate. I think you could enter easily into interclubs realistic or any pictorial competition. It was likely a composite, but it's just not altered clearly enough for me anyway. Okay, moving on to the next image. This is Bear in Prayer. I like that the photographer matched the diagonal light on both the church and the bear. I think it could have been better served by getting closer to the bear and not having it be such a small part of the image. So just crop in much closer, and keep that angle of view. Okay, next is Loaded Nash. I like the diagonal line that always gives movement to an image. I like the close crop creating an abstract and the graininess adding some texture. I would have liked to have seen the photographer remove the hot spots on the beach balls, and in this foreground white area in the left lower corner, it just needs something. It's taking up too much part of the frame. You could posit in a beach scene in there, or a lighthouse, a canoeist, anything to do with water. And I just think it would give a resting place for the eye in this pattern going around. Okay, moving to the sevens. This is called Chimneys. I like that the original image was captured with the roof low. I like that the photographer manipulated the chimneys around, or else they were really odd chimneys to start with. And I also like that the texture that they chose to put on the canvas. The three chimneys all reach upward. Unfortunately, I keep finding my eye keep on going upward, and I really feel like it needs something in the center to upper to stop, whether it be sun, moon, a bird, plane, just a stopping point so I don't escape out the top of the image. Okay, and this is called Trolling for Dinner. The photographer got a good point in action where the beak is just breaking the water. I like that they kept the smudge effect off of the eye so it's not too soft. I liked how they swirled the water around where the beak is going in, and they with the background and the softness of the smudging effect on the body and neck of the bird. The feathers on the wings I thought could use some more smudging. Right now they seem a little too crisp and grainy, and they could use some smoothness with more smudging there. Okay, now we are into the acceptances. And this is called Rose Overflowing by, and I thought it was a good choice. You've got the two roses, but they're touching, and then one of them is doing the breakout. I thought there was a little bit too much black in the right upper part, and the white halo along the bottom of the rose I thought was a little distracting. I think I'd rather see a drop shadow than a drop halo. That would probably work better, I thought. Okay, and then moving on to the nines. This is called Swinging in the Garden by I thought this was a very clever idea, these multiple composites. I really like that the swing is attached by the ropes around the flowers above the boy. I like that the lighting angles all match. All the lighting on both on the flowers, the boy, and the butterfly are coming in upper left diagonally through the image. The butterfly has been placed in a part of the image where it's in the boy's line of sight, so it appears that he's happy about the butterfly. There are some hot spots that I think could be filled in, and that would probably not let me enjoy the boy a little bit more. Otherwise, I might have put this a little bit higher even. All right, next is black and white. The first is Molten Barn. I like the diagonal composition. I like that the peak of the barn is lining up with the peak of the mountains in the background. I like that the barn has some really good contrast. However, the rest of the image to me feels a little bit on the muddy side. I think maybe not as much contrast as in the barn, but a little bit more in the rest of the image. It just doesn't have the same feel, like it belongs with the foreground part. Okay, and the next is saguaros. This does have good contrast. I like that the photographer got down low with the wide angle and shot upwards. I think it could be even stronger if the photographer had gone into the image some more and down at the base of that saguaro with the multiple arms and shot again from the ground up, but more of a vertical, and get those arms strong up against the sky with these really cool wispy clouds. I think that could have got it up a little bit further. Okay, this next image is Sturgeon Bay Lighthouse 611. The right side of the image is overpowering the lighthouse, which presumably, based on the title, is supposed to be the main subject. I want to follow down that strong tunnel, and I don't really want to go across the bridgeway to the lighthouse, especially since the lighthouse is soft. It's not sharp. Everything through here is nice and sharp. I do like the positioning of the horizon, and the clouds are really cool. It feels like two images to me that is divided. All right, moving on to the sevens. This is called Iron and Stone. I really enjoyed the shadow on texture play and the graphic feel to this image. I did think the foreground pillar blocked me out of the image a little bit. I found if I held up a hand so that I blocked off those four spikes before the shadow, that I went into the image more. Then I would see this shadow, and then I'd follow that into the next set of spikes and see the next shadow, and follow that up to the dome-ish rock round thing, and then back to the point of the shadow. So I moved around the image more easily. When most of the image is this front pillar, I felt like it was a stopping point. Okay, next, this is Joshua Trees. I like the strong leading lines going on into the trees. It just felt a little crowded at the bottom and top edges. I felt like it needed just a little bit more space there. And if you didn't have a wide enough angle to do that, you can get around it by doing a series of horizontal images overlapping and then stitching them together and cropping. Then you'll get that same perspective, but you'll have more space. Okay. Next, we have King Vulture 245. I like the angle that it's at with the wings spread. I like the brightness of the eye. I thought the beak and wattle could use a little more contrast. And then I follow the bird down to the bottom, and I'm a little distracted by the foliage to the left of the perch, but I'm really distracted that you can't see all of the bird's right leg. Right now, it looks like the bird has an amputated leg or a foot. It may be an education bird, and it really does have an amputated foot. More than likely, it's just hidden by the object it's perched on. Since this isn't nature, you could just move a claw so that it's peeking over the top there and avoiding the amputation look. There's a better shot of this same bird later on. All right, next we have Willow River. I very much like the S-curve working through the image, and that is sharp all the way through almost. It's got a strong depth of field. The water shutter speed was chosen well because the water is nice and silky, which is a good contrast to the textural part of the ice. What could have moved this up into the acceptances was there were some bright spots on the left that are pretty well blown out. Generally, when shooting digital, I treat it like slides. Make sure I get the highlights, and whatever happens to the shadows happens. But besides dealing with that brightness, the water itself is gray. I would brighten up the water, just select that and get it brighter so it looks more white. It just looks like a muddy gray right now. Okay, next we go into the acceptances. And this is Crowned Crane by... Okay, this is a great example of the use of the spiral for composition. You come into the bird's back, follow the neck around and down to the eye. So you're just spiraling in. I like the treatment on the feathers. I thought that was very useful or effective, and I'm glad they kept it off of the eye. Right now, the brightest part of this image is in the crown. You could bring that down a little bit and brighten up the iris of the eye a little bit, and then the brightest part of the image will be the eye, and I think that you'd find that a little bit more successful. All right, and this is Oak Sentinels by... I like that you've got three trees together here, and that you've picked an angle that has them overlapping and filling the blank sky. I like that the diagonal leads to the counter diagonal by the bluff. Maybe a secondary element between the first two tree trunks. You have to have that bluff in there. It looks like they're floating in space, but it is still a pretty strong image, and if you play around with adding something either realistic or creative, it might even give it a different feel. Okay, now moving to the nines. This is Marley Black and White by... I like the direct stare into the lens or the viewer, which is what that translates to. There's catchlights in the eye. You've got sharpness through the ears, well out into the paw, and I don't mind that the frontest part of the paw is a little soft because that just leads me into the eyes. That's what it's there for. I like most of the black background where I would expect part of the cat's body to be showing. It's a little heavy-handed, and that just feels a little off, which is the only reason it didn't get a 10. And speaking of 10s, this is Sand Surfer by... I really liked the undulating dunes that form the brightness along the top edges, forms these repetitive S's sinuously through the image. The photographer waited till the surfer got into a bright area since the surfer is dark. And that way you can keep the soft contrast in the dunes, but still have your subject clear. Because you're going to go zero. When most of the thing is light, you're going to the darkest area. Sort of the opposite, when most things are light or dark, you're going to the brightest area. I like that you waited till the surfer is pretty closely lined up with where they had been surfing. So you see those patterns in the sand. And the angle is showing them carrying the board. And I like that you kept the surfer very small in the frame. It gives a sense of the immensity of this dune area, and the isolation of it is very nice. Okay, moving on to nature. There was one image that didn't qualify, in my opinion, for nature, and it's titled Wild Horses. But I recently was berated by a biologist photographer for repeatedly referring to feral descendants of domesticated horses as wild horses. The correct term is feral. The only true wild horses, I'm told, are in Mongolia. So for that reason, I decided it was out of category. Anyway, I did like the lighting going through the image. You've got the triangle shape of the bush with the lighting gracing the top, and then it goes along the edge of the hillside and then into the bushes behind up across the gully. The horses are matching up because of almost identical poses. So you've got that repetition bringing you in. There's also a very nice rim lighting around the manes and the tails. Even if this is a pictorial, I don't think I would have put it into the acceptances for the simple reason that the faces are soft and they're not moving. So I think it must have been a slow shutter speed and motion blur. All right, moving on to the sixes. This is called Being. And what is particularly nice about this is the diagonal of the zinnia and marching with the diagonal of the B. I would have liked the depth of field extend all the way to the eye, but then you lose that nice bokeh. A way around that was be swiveling around the flowers so that the eye is more on the same plane as the body. And then that depth of field would include the eye. Okay, next is Greens for Lunch. I thought you caught some peak action with the coot not just swimming there, it's carrying something. Unfortunately, the eye is got a nice catch light, but it is soft, as is the rest of the coot's body. So I think just a slightly faster shutter speed was needed. The lighting is lovely. It's just some motion blur on the part of the coot. There's other things in the image, reflections and whatnot, that are sharp. So I don't think it's camera movement in this case. Okay, next we have My Woods. I thought the backlighting was well handled. The foreground leaves cover up too much of the trunks, I felt, to be a strong anchoring point. I would suggest looking for an area where you can use that those bones and have it be more clear. Iffy on whether or not I'm pretty sure the leaves in the foreground that are yellow and green are buckthorns, which is not technically nature either, at least not in this country, but it is in other countries, so I let that one slide. Okay, next we have Nature of Swans. I felt there was really good separation between an odd number of bird heads. I really like how the lighting is handled. Nothing is too horribly burned out, and there's nice interaction. I like that one swan is doing something slightly different. The wings are spread a little, the beak is open, and I would like that swan to be the sharpest. But unfortunately, the head and eye of that and beak of that swan are a little bit soft. Next, we have Who. I think the square crop is well suited to the subject. There's catch lights in the eyes, and um, the soft lighting is a good choice to be out on a day that's cloudy. That's when to head into the woods. Unfortunately, the autofocus locked on to the blooms coming out of the stick in the upper right. That is the sharpest part of the image. And instead of heading into the owl's face, which was probably what the photographer intended. It looks like they've tried to bring it up, but it's still not as sharp as that one little bloom off to the side. So it's just a case of trying to get your autofocus to focus on what you want. Okay, and then moving to the sevens. This is black swallowtail. I felt the photographer used the frame well. You've got diagonals coming in from the flower and the wings of the butterfly meeting at the flower. The wings are against the lighter part of the bokeh. They've been against the grayer part. The butterfly wouldn't have stood out as well. There's a nice catchlight in the butterfly's eye. But at this level, I had to start getting picky because apparently nature is one of your strongest categories. What I finally decided bothered me about this one was the blown out whites in the flower head. All right, and this is cheetah hunting. Perfect exposure, perfect shutter speed, perfect depth of field, focus is in the right spot. There were a couple of nitpicky things. The front left forepaw is right up against the edge of the frame. I can see some spots through the grass. The back paw is just at an awkward angle. And I would have liked to have seen either only one eye or all of both eyes. Those were kind of the nitpicky things. If you have a chance to watch this cheetah move, try to get shots with one of the forelegs in the air instead of the rear leg, and it'll look less awkward. And it won't be near the edge of the frame. Okay, this is eagle on roadkill. Tack sharp, great light. You got some of the venison in its beak, and it's probably shrieking at another eagle, warding it off. I wanted to have more room to the left, and maybe there was another eagle there. That's why you didn't do that. The hoof of the deer was a good touch, though, because that made it clear what the eagle's feeding on. But if you crop about half the distance off the right and an equal amount off the top, the eagle pops out even more, and it feels like it has more room to look into. All right, and this image is called, I lost my place, Ice Islands. I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of the sharp, lacy ice, clear ice along the edges of these rocks or mounds of snow with the moving water going through. That really attracted me. There's some great potential faces potentially in the snow that could be brought out with a little burning to bring out the shadows some more. But I kept getting pulled up to the bank, especially this one big down tree here that is so dark. If you crop almost to the water line, then I focus more in on the ice islands, which, guessing from the title, is meant to be the main subject. Okay, and this is Owl and Owlet. I like the catch lights in the eyes. Owl has got both pupils showing, mama or papa, whichever this is, and the baby has one eye showing with you, and you can see the eye. Instead of globally sharpening, I would suggest you go in and just sharpen the eyes, because what this global sharpening has done is made the Spanish moss and the adult's feathers feel crunchy, and that just doesn't have a right feel. The other little thing that I noticed is by the owl's right ear, it looks like some cloning was done of a hot spot, but it left visible edges. Possibly the remove tool will do a more blended job of that. All right, and moving on to the 8s. Okay, this is So What by, and this is another example of connecting two subjects, first by the eye contact between the two, and then they're both on the same log. And because the cormorant is standing with its wings spread, and the log forms the base and the birds lead up to a triangle, so that keeps the eye in the frame. There's two things that would have made it even stronger. One of them is the water line has the appearance of not being, it shouldn't being slanted a little bit. I'd straighten that. At the time of capture, I would have liked to have seen more of the reflections. I don't think you need all that up above the cormorant. All right, and moving on to the 9s. This is Collared Aracari by, all right, I love the bokeh and the pose to this image. The bird is actually mimicking the shape of the leaf twig that's coming up next to it. There's beautiful lighting into the eye and nice soft overall lighting. Great bokeh, as I mentioned. And the one thing that would have got it the next level is when you're in this much greenery, anything that is buff or white colored will take on a greenish tinge. And had the photographer corrected the greenish tinge in the stomach and breast feathers, I could easily have jumped that to a 10. Okay. And next we have White-necked Jacobins. And this is yet another example of two subjects connected by what they're feeding off of. I like that the bottle bush is got the arc coming in, and I like that they fill the other two diagonals going away. Both the flower and their eyes are tack sharp. I like that you've got some motion blur in the wings so you don't look just frozen in the sky. The one little thing that would have gotten them up to a 10 is the haloing around their heads and bodies. The photographer may have selected them to brighten, and maybe the selection tool went over a little bit, and then it brightened the background a little as well. So if you take a subtract brush and with a really nice soft brush, just barely brush into the blue a little, and that'll back that off quite a bit. All right, now we got a couple of 10s in here. This is King Vulture 219. And I think it might even be the same bird, but it is a much more effective pose and depth of field and everything. If it has an injured foot, you're not showing them. The eyes almost look like googly eyes from this angle, and that just adds humor to the image. And then there's texture in the wattle, and the depth of field goes from the foreground part of the wings all the way through the back of the head. You got beautiful bokeh. The wings form a lower horizon, so that mentally makes it feel like it's not divided the photo in half. The beak is just turned sideways enough that you can get a sense of it without losing the eyes. And then the bokeh in the background is a complementary green to the orange in the bird's neck. Very well done. Okay, and then the other 10 is Hawk Owl by another beautifully done image. The shutter speed was well chosen. You got some sense of the snow, but you don't lose that beautiful soft bokeh around it in the light. The composition is such with the angle of the owl's body going down to the post or stump dead on the right, and then going across and back up. There's a triangle there. They managed to get a frame without snow over the eyes, and they may have brightened the eyes and the beak a little bit, but they refrained from getting too carried away or doing so with the owl's body, because this soft, light feel has an excellent mood to it. Well done. Okay, moving to phone. 6 is road trip finds. The diagonal composition avoids a static feel to the image. I didn't particularly enjoy the soft focus look. It would have been okay if maybe just one thing had been sharper, like maybe the plants in the flower box. I just wanted something sharp to rest my eyes on, and I think this was a deliberate soft focus effect, probably in the phone, but I just wanted someplace that was sharp, just one thing. All right, and this item is Winter Beauty. I really enjoyed the warm sunlight on the icicle juxtaposed against the blue sky. I don't think it needed quite as much on the left. And I really want to focus on this center icicle hanging down. Unfortunately, the sharpness doesn't extend to the tip. I would have liked to have had the less of the upper part sharp and more of that inner point sharp. And then moving to the 7s, we have Curious Mind. I really like the action that's going on. You've got the side of the boy's face, not the back of his head. You can see the leaf is falling and from his open hand, so you get the sense that he's been dropping leaves down there, and there's some interesting stuff in the water. Boardwalk is pretty cool, and it frames his body. I think I would have liked the photographer to concentrate on the lower quarter. As shown, I find after I've looked at the boy, I want to follow the palmetto leaf up and into the surface greenery, and then I see, oh, the trail keeps going. What's back there? And I lose the boy. So I was just cropping a lot of the greenery out and getting down to just the boy, the boardwalk, and the water. Okay, and this is called Evening in the Desert. And I particularly like the way the mesquite, I think it is framing the other cacti in the image, and that visual horizon is low. I like that you see some saguaros in the background. I've gone back and forth on whether or not I like or dislike the lights in the tree being blown out. I don't think it's too terribly a problem, but I would like to get rid of, the light that is in the background near the base of that other cactus. That light I find really distracting. Okay, and moving on to the 8s, we have alley seating by... You guys are really good about breaking the rules of odd numbers. But again, the chairs are grouped together and the shadows overlap. So even though there's 2 chairs, they are one focal point. I thought it was a great use of negative space. I thought you could make the chairs stand out even more if it's just red on beige squares. To accomplish that, just crop out the asphalt in front and crop just inside that vertical board that's off to the right side. And then you'll get just the beige and the chairs and the squares and the round. I thought that would make it even stronger. Okay, and then finally, as a 9, we have Rainy Day in the Bighorns. I thought this had a nice, really strong textural leading line. I really liked that they brought out the texture and the texture in the rocks, and then the lightness behind the rocks with enough detail in the clouds that the virga is coming down nice high horizon. What I think would make it even stronger is the trees in the upper left. They are dark and very close to the edge, and they're pulling my eye. So I would maybe get rid of those. Okay, and then moving on to pictorial. We have a 6 in that. Autumn leaves. I like that the photographer found a colorful leaf amongst some very neat texturals. What pulled it back for me was the bright greens at the top. It kept wanting to pull me up to the top of the image. So either darken those and desaturate those, or at the time of capture, plump a bunch of dead leaves on them so that the eye has to focus in on this beautiful decaying leaf with whatever fungus spots those are on it. But it's got a lot of great texture. There's even a seed overlapping it, so it would work really nicely if I wasn't finding my eye wandering out the top of the frame. Okay, and then 7s. This we have Cactus Graphic. And this is very well done. You got the green against the pink, and it's far enough back that it's providing a decent bokeh. I like that you've got 3 arms on the cactus. One's coming forward more than off to the side. I like these 4 little leaflets leading up to the 5th one. I think it could be stronger if you burned in some of the depressions and gave it more of a 3D effect on the plant. Okay. And next we have Fancy Indeed. This image I really like the bottom 2/3 of. I just felt that the blue sky at the top and the centered horizon were incongruous with the desolation of the abandoned chair. So if you get rid of about 2/3 of the sky, so you get down to the really blah part and the horizon's all the way up there, that stark gray seems to fit the scene more. I like that you got close to the chair with a wide angle lens to really emphasize this has been well and truly abandoned. And next, we've got Farm Cat Taking a Break. I like the leading line going up to the cat. I like that the cat has lifted its eyes up so it's catching the light in them. And I like the angle of the light. I did not like the bright area going across the top and the out of focus piece of old farm equipment in the upper area of the image. I think it would be better served by cropping that top part off. And if you want to keep a similar ratio, you could come in on some of that hosta on the left and have mostly irises, the leading line of the rusted tractor, or looks like a tractor seat the cat's resting in. All right, and next, this is Old Faithful at Night. I really like that they kept the horizon low and that the geyser is coming out of a very low center point and swooping through the image. What was incongruous to me was how sharp the stars were compared to how unsharp the foreground mound was. It didn't seem to fit. I kept wanting to go to the sharp stars because the eye does tend to want to go what is sharp, and that isn't the subject in this image. So I would have pre-focused on the foreground and not let the camera focus on the stars. You potentially could have gone with a slightly faster shutter speed to get some billowing texture to the steam as it's blowing away. But mostly it was the stars that bothered me. All right, this image is Snowboarder. And I really like the angle of view that the photographer took, getting underneath them as they're going over their jump. And getting them up against the sky, and you got that diagonal across the image. I like the treatment on the sky, but it needed a faster shutter speed, I felt. These guys are really booking when they go into their jumps. So you have to think of it as photographing a fast bird or a race car. You want the faster shutter speeds, because I would have liked to have seen either the skull or the head mask sharp, one or the other at least. And there really isn't anything sharp because he's just moving too fast. All right, and we get into the eights. And this is John Bear Grease Sled Dog Marathon by. I like that the photographer got low to the ground at eye level with the dogs. And the dogs are the focus of this. Their eyes are sharp. You've got 3 in front, 1 in back, and you've got the snow being kicked up, so you know these dogs are booking. And I like that the musher is slightly out of focus so that you can concentrate more on the dogs, and it's clear they're the subject. What pulled me away was the pink ribbon off to the sides. I think you'd still have a really strong image if you just crop that out. Okay, next there is a Pump House on Jardine, Montana by. All right, I love the mirror image of this. You still kept the horizon nice and high, but you've got all the mirror image. The symmetry of the mirror image is broken by the reflection of the moon that gives my eye a place to rest. I like the position of the pump house in the image, and I want to keep going around in this circular area. This would have scored even higher if you just pulled back the brightness in the sky behind the pump house, because it's trying to pull me away from the pump house, and that is the subject. So anything that's detracting from your subject, you want to minimize. What will point or bring out the subject, maximize. All right, and then moving on to the nines. This is Mustang Portrait by. All right, this one is tack sharp from the tip of the nose through the ears into part of the mane. So great depth of field. The lighting is very soft, but still bringing out the textural details in the horse. Both eyes are visible, both eyes have a pupil, both eyes have a catch light. I like the black background. I just thought it was a little heavy on top, and maybe you could lose a little bit on top to get that next level. Okay, and then we have Sturgeon Bay Lighthouse 611. This is the one I was talking about that I thought was better composed. You do still start out on the right with this strong image, but now it leads me to a stronger diagonal that pulls me across with another strong diagonal that leads me to the lighthouse. So this is, again, a Fibonacci spiral with a lot of triangles. Let's put it that way. The horizon is kept nice and low. The angle is chosen so the sun is close enough to the lighthouse that it's not competing as a separate image, like look way over here, and it's close to the lighthouse. The depth of field has been stopped down to both get good detail from front to back of the lighthouse and to bring out the starburst in the sun rays. The shutter speed is long enough or else the ISO is high enough to allow the light to wrap around the lighthouse and bring out some of the details, so it's not just a solid black shape. In the sky, you've got some jet contrails on the right pointing directly to the lighthouse. There is also a jet contrail coming in from the left that's probably fresher because it's brighter. I would maybe try darkening the white parts of it to make it blend in with the same brightness level as the other contrails so it doesn't stand out quite as much. And that probably would have got it over the hump to a 10. All right, and speaking of 10s, our final image is River Tree. And what can I say? You've got mirror images, and you can get away with a centered horizon when you have mirror images. It's not a requirement that you get away from it. It's not centered side to side. You've got this leading line into the tree of some bits of land sticking up through the flood. You've got some bits of lighter foliage branches in the background that match the tree and lead you back to the tree. So I go from tree down to reflection, follow the line back and back to the tree. And then the icing on the cake, besides the soft light, is you've got this beautiful atmospheric fog giving you a wonderful sense of mood. All right, now moving on to the topics. And that was backyard or house. No fives there. There is a 6 or 2. This one, I thought the photographer is really onto a good idea, but there are a couple of things that would make it more congruent. The skier is placed in a good spot that you could imagine that they're skiing on the backyard snowbank, but the lighting is so very different. The snow has almost a pink tinge to it, and it's shadowy. It needs a color correction and some brightening. The skier was in full sun, is really bright. You could select the highlights of the skier and bring that down a little bit so that you blend the lighting some more. The other thing that I noticed is not all of the ski poles got selected. There are gaps. And it can be frustrating trying to select things. I find it easier to do it with a mask. So if you just do a loose selection around the skier and feather it and pop it in and put a mask on it, then if you realize you've missed part of the ski pole, you don't need to start over. You just switch your brush color on the mask. Okay, next we have tree frog. I really like the in-your-face positioning of the frog dead center. I think a square crop that loses the green on the side, so there's only the complementary orange and the green of the frog, would be even stronger in your face. Like the horse, I would have liked to have seen this in focus from the tip of the nose past the eyes, and because of the in the face part. And I think that would lead to a stronger image. You're not going to be able to deal with the specular highlights. Believe me, I've tried. These gray northern tree frogs only turn green when they're in the breeding frame of mind, and they tend to stick out of flowers like this, high noon. And diffusers don't help, polarizers don't help. If you're really picky, you can do a lot of cloning, but those are going to be there no matter what. I think they are placed in areas that define the shape of the frog rather than distracting, so that worked. Okay, and then we go to the 7s, and this is called Bare Thread. And I like that the photographer filled the frame with the thread. I like the angle of the lighting, so it brings these bright sheen of lights in a vertical down through images that are, the threads are lined up horizontally. So there is some movement that way. I know that these stands recede, so there's enough depth of field or focus stacking from front to back row are all sharp. I would have liked something to rest my eye on, be it a thimble, a needle, just as something. Potentially you could have put, like a lot of the various blue palettes together with maybe one of an opposite color on a third line. Those are possible suggestions to make it stronger. This next image is Birthday Roses. And I like the angle of lighting coming diagonally through that matches the angle the photographer has taken on the chest that they're seated on. I like that they chose to place the yellow roses on a chest with yellow in it. There's even yellow dots in the wallpaper. There's some yellow in the books behind it. I would like to see the books darker and softer, because right now, Girl with Pearl Earring and the writing on the books is pulling me past the roses. And since the roses are the topic, I would maybe like to see you do some less decorative books behind it. And then you could also bounce some light or do it in post with a radial gradient into the foreground rows on the right, to help keep the eye in on the main roses. Okay, and this is Busy Mama Bluebird. And I like the depth of field. It is sharp from the furthest point towards the viewer to the back of the bird house. And yet there's a nice bokeh. They caught Mama as she's trying to decide how to get that branch into the house. And so she's got her tail splayed to balance her while she clings. You've got the shadow echoing that, creating a circular composition. I don't mind the tall branch of that stick that goes up just to the side of her eye and up into the birdhouse. But I find if I look close, there is a catchlight in that bird's eye. Unfortunately, said catchlight is at the tip of this little teeny weeny twig that only goes into the black of her eye. And so it looks like it's part of the tip. I don't know if the remove tool will be smart enough to reveal that by getting that little twig that's just overlapping that catchlight, but I think that would make it a little bit stronger to be able to see into the catchlight. Okay, this is called Grandson's Choo Choo. And I like the angle of view where you're slightly up and looking down so that you frame the S-curve. I like the depth of field, including the train and conductor, but falling off as it goes back through the rest of the track, and that you've placed a clean floor all around it. I think to make it even stronger, you probably need Grandson in the picture, whether he be out of focus on the floor or just looking at him, or a hand reaching in to move a conductor or something. It's all ready to be played with. Where's the player is kind of what my mind went to. Okay, and this next image is called Home Sweet Home. And I really like the glowy Orton effect to the image. It gives a really nice sense of coziness. Whether that was caused from camera movement or if it was done in post, I think the main part of the room, you've got your diagonals going from the counter to the lamp in the other diagonal, and then the dog back to the fireplace. What would really help for me is if the dog wasn't also Ortoned, especially around the eyes and face. So, either put it on a tripod so you don't have the camera movement and just do the Orton effect elsewhere, or else back the Orton effect off on the dog if you did it in post. Okay, and next we have House Panther. That's a really regal pose. I like that you got low and looking up at the cat. That is a power thing, and that's what cats are into. Normally, chiaroscuro effect does not work well on animals as it does in people, but there's enough light being bounced back from the material of the whatever is to the side of the cat that it's filling in a little bit on the side. There are some distracting elements that I think removing would make stronger, and mostly of them can be removed with cropping. You can crop it more vertically, just to the left of the cat, before you get to that bright stroby round thing to the right of the sill. And you could crop out this twig on the carpet, but still have a little bit of space below the paws. And then crop out this bright spot on the side. And that would only leave a little bit of the wire that seems to be growing out of the ear to either darken or try to get rid of. I would also select the eyes and just bring up the highlight slider. That will help improve the catchlight without disturbing the exposure and make it look like the eyes are glowing in the dark. Okay. Next, we have Not a Photography Day. Well, you managed to make one anyway. I really like the composition in here. You coming up through the main body of the sewing machine and part of the cross arm and down to the foot, and then having the hand in there to both give a sense of scale and action. I like that the thread has been stopped, or the needle has been stopped, or else you used to fasten a shutter speed to stop it. The brightness in the body in the upper right corner, those bright areas are pulling my eye away. I'd like to see those toned down so that the brightest part of the image is at the foot of the sewing machine. All right, moving into the 8s. This one is called Curiosity. And I do like the image as presented, which is why I got an acceptance, but there is a potential for it could have gone way up there. What kept drawing my eye away from the cat is the bright area in the slats of the plant stand. So if I crop across and just lose those bright areas, and then lose the brightness to the left on the inside of the sliding glass door frame, then the cat's body is coming out of the corner. You don't mind that the tail is gone because you don't even see the rest of the body down there. And then I could focus in on the cat and the Norfolk pine and this beautiful lighting. And then it's the time of year where it's too cold to go outside and wash your windows. So you've got this beautiful grunge in the windows around, just making those stand out. And that would have pushed this all the way to a 10. It had that simple cropping done. Okay, moving on for the 9s. This is Freddie. Freddie is much more cooperative. He is doing a lovely pose, whether he's looking at something squeaky or not. It's on the fur is surrounding him, and he's got the angle that goes at cross angle to his body. You've got some light bouncing into the bow tie. There is acceptable depth of field from the nose to the hat. However, the hat, the writing is the sharpest part. I would like to see that reversed so that the fore part of the dog is the sharpest back to the hat. And that would have helped quite a bit, I think. Plus toning down some of the hotness in the hat there. All right, and next we have Backyard Visitor. I think what really makes this shot is the Hummer sticking its tongue out. And the tongue is being stuck out fast enough that you've got a sense of motion to it. There's nice sharpness in the eye, and the head and feathers have great detail. The square crop suits. What would have got into a 10 is if you had dealt with those hot spots on the twigs around. There's 3, one above the beak and one off to the left and one below the bird. Those are pulling my eye. I would like to see you deal with those. All right, and we get to the 10s. And this is Flowers by Candlelight by, I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. I looked at this for the longest time. I thought there's 2 subjects and only a doily on a table to connect them. Why is this working? Because it was working in my mind. And I finally realized that from the candle, there's these shadowy streaks at the top, and they lead the eye up to the shadow of the flowers on the wall, which are curving around and directing me to the can. And then you've got the light skipping across the flowers in the can, and then the reflection of the candle in the can itself, the vertical stripes, leading down to the bright part of the doily that goes across. So it's keeping me in a circle. And I think that is why it is working. So well spotted, or good idea to add some fill light in so you got that shadow on the wall. Otherwise, I would have said these are 2 images. They're not communicating enough, but that shadow made the difference. And then our other 10 is Window Dressing by. And again, I thought this was beautiful. Lots and lots of layering of green, both texture and color, and 3 and 3. The horizon on the windowsill is low. You've got the 3 triangles down pointing at the 3 plants. You've got multiple shades of green throughout. The plants are even pointing to each other once you follow the triangle down. There's some green spilling into the orange of the sill, and then you got a little bit of orange on the pots, but there's 3. And then you got this one plant with just a little bit of purple on which to rest the eye. Well done. All right, I'll finish up with the travel images. First, start with the 6. This is Badlands. Excuse me. What I really liked about this was the juxtaposition of the orange against the green, yellows, and orange going through the Badlands. However, I felt that the orange was such a big part of the frame, like over half, that it blocked me from exploring the image. If I crop in from the right so it's more of a vertical frame, and maybe just to the right of these jagged peaks along the skyline, then I feel like the orange is just not blocking me, but it's leading me into the orange in the grasses, and I zigzag through the cliffs or the hills up to the green in the top of the rocks there. Okay, and this is Hook Lighthouse, Ireland. I thought the leading line into the lighthouse was well done, both from the daisies and from the side. I like that the horizon is not dead center. It's a little bit above. And I think you need some of that because these clouds really make the reason clear in the detail on the clouds why the lighthouse is necessary. Where it fell apart for me was where the mid-ground is not sharp. It's incongruous to have the front sharp, the back sharp, but the middle is not sharp. So if this was a focus stack, remember to do the middle ground. If it was a composite, you could potentially darken the middle ground by and then not make it so, that would help make it not so obvious that it's not sharp. Okay, and then this is Mayan Highlands. I felt that a panoramic crop would be more suited to this image. I like the leading lines of the branches and the clouds heading more towards the blue house, but I didn't think a lot of the foreground was needed. I was more interested in that blue house, and I didn't think a lot of empty space in the clouds above the clouds is needed either. So just do a panel crop and then deal with your dust spots. There's a lot of dust spots in the sky. All right, moving to 7, Assessing the Climb, Montserrat, Spain. I like that the placement of the hikers with a wide angle. You got close enough to them so that they're pretty large in the frame. They conveniently dress so that the blue guys are flanking the guys with the orange. And I like that the center guy is holding a hand up towards the mountains. So you have an idea between that and the ropes that they're carrying what they're going to be up to. I like, how the road sweeps in, past them and to the wall. And then you've got these line of signs and the brightness on the wall leading you back. But then you get to the end of the signs and there's only half the S-curve. Where's the rest of the S-curve? So I would like to see you do some dodging of the rest of the S-curve up through the hills and then back down to them to keep the eye moving through the scene. Okay, and then moving to the 8s. This is John's Pass Greeter by... I like that the sign is legible about the marina. I like having the pelican in the center of all this busyness, but the pelican is the sharpest part. There's a catch light in the eye to pull it in, and there's a lot of leading lines leading or converging on the pelican. I think the bright yellows just behind the pelican could be toned down on the luminosity so that they're not brighter than the bird, because I do want to go past the bird to that brightness. Okay, and then the 9, Badlands, Night Sky. That is just beautifully done. I like the way the Milky Way goes diagonally across the sky and that the road leads into the image. There is some light pollution from a town beyond the Badlands. You could just crop some of the left off and that will get rid of that. I do not want to lose any of the road. What I'd like you to do is to dodge along the lines of the road to help them compete with the Milky Way, because I think that's an integral part of the image. And thank you for letting me judge. That's all.